2 months ago, I was Margaret, 67, grieving widow, devoted wife, and full-time mother to one spectacularly ungrateful daughter. When Robert, my husband of 4 decades, collapsed in the garden with a heart attack, I thought my world had ended. Instead, it had only just begun to unravel. Victoria, my only child, swooped in wearing designer heels and a face that could win sympathy Oscars. She clutched my hand at the funeral, whispering about how hard this must be for me. Hard for me? Honey, my entire life had just been ripped in two. But behind those crocodile tears, calculation shimmered like cheap perfume. Mom, you can't possibly manage that big house alone, she cooed, her voice dripping with false concern. The stairs, the maintenance, all those memories, it's not healthy. I should have known then. Should have recognized the vulture circling, not for my comfort, but for her inheritance. But decades of being the good wife, the agreeable mother, had trained me to smile, nod, and stay small. The mask slipped fast. Within days, Victoria and her banker husband Kevin were waving glossy pamphlets of retirement communities in my face at family dinners. Mom, you'd love it there. People your age, activities, no responsibilities. What they meant was no inconvenience, no mother standing between us and the house. I clung to Robert's memory, to the bedroom I couldn't yet pack, to the walls where I'd baked birthday cakes and nursed him through pneumonia. But Victoria was relentless. Then, last Tuesday, she delivered the killing blow. Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the accounts. I've just been letting you stay here out of kindness. But it's time for you to find your own place. You're useless now. Useless. Just the wife, just the mother. 43 years reduced to 3 words. That night, I folded my life into 2 suitcases and 1 box of photographs. Victoria checked her watch in the doorway like I was making her late for a manicure. Kevin loaded my bags into their BMW with the efficiency of a garbage collector. There's a nice senior complex on Maple Street, Victoria chirped. Affordable, affordable. My daughter was about to inherit millions, and she was shoving me toward a welfare motel. As the car pulled away, my house shrank in the rearview mirror. A fortress I had scrubbed, polished, and filled with love for 43 years. Gone. But listen closely, honey. That night, as I sat on a sagging motel mattress staring at peeling wallpaper, something shifted. The obedient wife, the pushover mother, she was gone too. And in her place was a woman ready to play the game Victoria thought she'd already won. Pawn? No. Queen. 3 days after Robert's funeral, I realized grief wasn't the only vulture circling me. It had a name. Victoria. If you're still with me, honey, make sure you subscribe, because you'll want front row seats for how my little princess unmasked herself. Robert was barely in the ground when Victoria staged her performance of dutiful daughter. She arrived at my doorstep in black silk and crocodile tears, clutching a casserole she'd clearly bought, not baked. Mom, you can't stay in that big old house all alone, she sighed, placing her manicured hand over mine like she was Mother Teresa with a trust fund. It's not safe. The memories, the stares, the loneliness. Translation? The house is too valuable to waste on you. Kevin, her investment banker husband, chimed in during Sunday dinner. Your health comes first, Margaret. A retirement community would be perfect activities. New friends, no stress. No stress for them. They wanted me out so they could slide in like squatters in Armani suits. I nodded, I smiled, I swallowed the insult. That's what I'd always done. The agreeable wife, the mother who never made waves. But inside, the suspicion grew claws. 2 weeks later, the facade cracked completely. Victoria arrived unannounced, strutting through the door like she already owned the deed. Behind her, Kevin wheeled in 2 oversized suitcases. Mom, she announced, her voice honeyed but her eyes cold steel. We've made a decision. Kevin got a promotion. We're moving into town immediately. This house is perfect for us. I blinked. Move in? But this is my home. And then the mask fell. Actually, Mom, it's our home. Dad's will left me everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. I've been generous letting you stay here, but it's time you find somewhere else. The words hit harder than Robert's death. At least his heart attack hadn't been a choice. Victoria, I whispered, surely there's been some mistake. She smiled, sharp, and final. No mistake. Dad knew I'd take better care of his legacy than you ever could. You were just the wife. Just the wife. 43 years of devotion boiled down to an afterthought. Kevin stepped forward, clapping his hands together like he was closing a business deal. Margaret, you'll love having independence again. No more house maintenance, no property taxes. Freedom. Freedom? Honey, that's what prisoners get when the gates swing open after a 20-year sentence. And it felt just as cold. That night, I carried my life into 2 suitcases while Victoria tapped her watch from the doorway, impatient. She handed me $200 in cash, like tipping a maid after room service. "There's a nice senior complex on Maple Street," she said, her smile sugar-coated arsenic. Affordable. Affordable. That word still echoes in my ears like a gunshot. But here's the truth. When someone strips you bare, they don't realize they've just armed you. Every insult, every cruelty, every betrayal, that's ammunition. And I was about to reload. The night they threw me out, the air was cold enough to bite through my sweater. My life was packed into 2 suitcases and 1 box of photographs, balanced on the curb like trash waiting for collection. Kevin slammed the trunk of their BMW, dusted his hands, and looked at me the way you'd look at a problem you've finally deleted from your inbox. Victoria leaned out the car window, her lips curled into that polished smile that had fooled neighbors and church ladies for years. "There's a place on Maple Street. Senior housing. Affordable." She rolled the window up before I could answer. Affordable. That single word clanged in my ears as the car taillights disappeared into the dark. At 8:30 p.m., I dragged my bags down cracked sidewalks until I found a motel with a flickering neon sign, Sunset Inn. Vacancy. I walked in with trembling hands and a $200 bill in my wallet, the parting gift from my daughter, as if a wad of cash could replace dignity. The clerk, a boy who couldn't have been older than my grandson, handed me a key without making eye contact, room 14. The smell hit me first. Cigarettes, bleach, and something sour, like despair soaked into the carpet. The bed sagged in the middle. The bathroom tiles were cracked, grout black with mold. A single bulb buzzed overhead, throwing light like an interrogation room. I placed my box of photographs on the nightstand. Robert's smile stared back at me from behind the glass frame. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I let them take everything." Lying on that lumpy mattress, I counted the money. $200. At the cheapest weekly rate, I'd last maybe 10 days. After that, homeless shelters, park benches, a woman who had baked birthday cakes, sewn Halloween costumes, and ironed work shirts for 40 years, reduced to calculating how many nights she could afford not to sleep on the street. But the worst wasn't the smell or the mattress or the hunger twisting in my stomach. It was the silence. In my house, the silence had been filled with Robert's laughter, the ticking of our grandfather clock, the kettle whistling at noon. Here, the silence was sharp, empty, accusatory. I replayed Victoria's words in my head. "You were just the wife," over and over until the phrase carved itself into my chest like a brand. At 2:17 a.m., unable to sleep, I reached into the box of photographs. Beneath Robert's picture, my fingers brushed something stiff. A sealed envelope with my name on it, in his handwriting. I tore it open. Inside was a letter. One paragraph stopped my breath. "If anything happens to me, Margaret, remember to call Mr. Daniels. He has the original paperwork." Paperwork. Daniels. Original. My mind clicked into place. Robert had always been meticulous, the kind of man who filed receipts from 20 years ago. If there was original paperwork, it wasn't what Victoria had waved in my face. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark not of grief, but of suspicion. Maybe I wasn't powerless. Maybe this wasn't the end. I sat upright, letter trembling in my hands. "You stole my house, Victoria," I whispered into the dark. "But you might have underestimated the pawn you thought you'd pushed off the board. Because pawns, honey, don't just disappear. Sometimes they reach the other side. And when they do, they become queens." The morning after I found Robert's letter, I ironed my only decent blouse on the motel's scarred dresser, brushed the cigarette smell out of my hair, and dialed the number scrawled in his handwriting. Mr. Daniels, attorney at law. His secretary slotted me in for 11 a.m. sharp. At 10:47, I was standing outside a brick building on Main Street, clutching my purse like a lifeline. The brass plaque by the door gleamed, Daniels and Myers, estate law. My palms were slick. I pushed the door open anyway. Mr. Daniels looked exactly as I remembered. Gray suit, steel glasses, the kind of man who treated paper as holy scripture. He rose when I entered. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently. "I've been expecting you sooner." I frowned. "Expecting me?" He gestured toward a mahogany folder on his desk. "Your husband left very clear instructions." When he opened the folder, I braced myself for the cruel words Victoria had spat. "Everything is mine." Instead, I saw Robert's familiar signature beneath a very different truth. "Your husband left the house, all joint accounts, and 70% of his assets to you, Mrs. Whitmore," Daniels explained. "Your daughter was named as a beneficiary of $10 million, but with conditions. She was required to provide ongoing care for you, housing, medical needs, companionship. Failure to do so forfeits her inheritance." I blinked. "You're saying—" He slid the papers across the desk. "I'm saying Victoria lied, and in attempting to evict you, she has effectively disqualified herself. By law, those assets revert back to you." My heart slammed against my ribs. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Daniels continued, calm and precise. "Furthermore, the document she showed you was a forgery. We'll be submitting this to the court immediately. Every bank account and property in her possession will be frozen within 48 hours. I gripped the edge of the desk, steadying myself. Last night I was a homeless widow in a moldy motel. At 11:32 a.m., I was the legal owner of the very house my daughter had stolen. Affordable. Victoria had sneered as she shoved me toward the street. Now her credit cards would bounce. Her accounts would read zero. Her mansion in the making was about to become dust. I straightened my shoulders, something inside me hardening. "So what happens next?" Daniels closed the folder with a quiet click. "Next, Mrs. Whitmore, we hold them accountable. I suggest you prepare yourself. The game has only just begun." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good, because I'm ready to play. Watch me." By 8:30 the next morning, the first domino had already fallen. I sat in the motel lobby, sipping bitter coffee out of a styrofoam cup, when my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Victoria. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, I answered. Her voice was sharp, panicked, so unlike the silk-smooth tone she'd used to evict me. "Mom, did you do something? My card just got declined at Bloomingdale's. Kevin's account isn't working either. The bank says everything's frozen." I leaned back in the plastic chair, the letter from Mr. Daniels folded neatly in my purse like a royal flush. "Frozen," I repeated, letting the word drip with satisfaction. "Yes, honey, that tends to happen when you forge legal documents and steal from your mother." There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. "Mom, let's not make this dramatic. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. We're family." "Family." "No. That's DNA." I let the silence stretch until she squirmed on the other end. Then I delivered the blow. "I was sitting in Mr. Daniels' office yesterday morning, the attorney your father trusted. He showed me the real will, the one that says you had to take care of me to see a single dollar. Instead, you threw me into a motel and handed me $200 in petty cash. Do you know what that means, Victoria?" Her breath hitched. "No, it's not possible. It means you're broke." I lowered my voice, each word cutting clean. "It means the house is mine. The accounts are mine. Everything you thought you stole, gone. And soon the police will have a word with you and Kevin about fraud." "Mom, please don't do this." Her voice cracked, slipping into desperation. "We can work this out. I didn't mean—" I cut her off. "Watch me." At 10 a.m., Daniels confirmed the freeze had gone through. Every account, every card, every asset with her name on it locked. By 2:15, Victoria called again. By 4, Kevin sent a frantic email, subject line, "Urgent family matter." They were cornered rats, scrambling. And I was no longer the pawn they'd pushed aside. That night, I poured myself motel coffee like it was champagne. Tomorrow, Daniels would file charges. But tonight, I savored the irony. Victoria had tossed me out like garbage. And in less than 24 hours, the trash had taken back the throne. They thought I was bluffing. That's the funniest part. Victoria always believed I was too soft to fight back, too weak to pick up the phone, too old to understand the law. She forgot one thing. A woman who's been underestimated her whole life eventually learns how to weaponize it. 2 days after the freeze, I got the call from Mr. Daniels at exactly 9:14 a.m. Mrs. Whitmore, the sheriff's office will be executing the warrant this evening. If you'd like to witness it. Would I like to witness it? Honey, I wouldn't have missed it for the world. At 6:45 p.m., I was parked across the street from the sleek restaurant downtown where Victoria and Kevin were enjoying cocktails they couldn't afford anymore. Through the tinted windows, I watched them laugh too loudly, the kind of brittle laughter people use when they're drowning. At 6:59, 2 unmarked cars pulled up. 4 deputies stepped out, jackets unbuttoned, radios crackling. The doors swung open, and suddenly the laughter inside turned into chaos. "Victoria Whitmore?" the deputy called, voice booming across the room. My daughter's face drained of color. Kevin tried to bluster, waving his Rolex like a badge of immunity. "This is a mistake. Do you know who we are?" The deputy's reply was ice. "Yes, sir. Fraud suspects under investigation." The bracelets clicked shut around Kevin's wrists first, then Victoria's. She gasped, her voice pitching high. "You can't do this. My father left me everything." The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, you can explain that to the judge. For now, you're coming with us." They hustled them out into the flashing lights of a waiting squad car. Paparazzi? Not exactly, but half the neighborhood was there, phones raised, recording every second. Victoria always wanted an audience. She got one. And me? I sat across the street, my coffee cooling in the cup holder, watching my daughter's empire collapse in real time. At 8:30 p.m., my motel phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom?" It was Victoria, voice small, cracking. "They let me make one call. Please, bail us out. I'll do anything." I almost laughed. Anything. Where was that promise when she shoved me onto the curb with $200 and a warning to find somewhere to die? "Bail?" I said, letting the word hang like a blade. "You think I'm going to spend my money, the money you tried to steal, to drag you out of a cell you earned?" "Mom, listen," she hissed, panic bubbling over. "Kevin says he can fix this. He knows people. But we need cash tonight. If you don't help, everything will come out in court. Things you don't want aired." Ah, there it was. The blackmail. The Whitmore family brand of love. "What things?" I asked, voice flat. She swallowed. "Dad's finances weren't as clean as you think. There are irregularities. Offshore accounts. If the prosecutors dig, they'll drag your name into it too." So this was the new strategy. Drag Robert's memory through the mud. Paint me as complicit. The same daughter who toasted him at the funeral as the most honorable man I knew was now using his ghost as a bargaining chip. I let the silence stretch until I could almost hear her pulse racing down the line. Then I said it, soft but lethal. "Operation Justice has already begun, Victoria. And you're the target." She sputtered. "Operation what?" Catchy, isn't it? That's what I'm calling it. Step 1 was freezing your assets. Step 2 was watching you get cuffed. Step 3? Making sure everyone sees exactly what kind of daughter you turned out to be. Her voice broke, a strangled sob. "Mom, please, don't do this. We're family." "Family?" I whispered. "No, honey. That's DNA." I hung up before she could respond. At 11:02 p.m., Daniels called again. "There'll be a rain tomorrow morning. Bail's steep, but word is Kevin's already trying to strike a deal. Don't be surprised if he throws her under the bus." I stared at the cracked motel ceiling, the irony hitting like a punchline. For years, Victoria thought I was disposable. Tonight, she discovered what disposable really felt like. Affordable, that was the word she used. Affordable housing, affordable life, affordable mother. But there was nothing affordable about the lesson she was learning now. And tomorrow, in that courtroom, the price would double. Watch me. You think the story ends when the handcuffs click? Honey, that's just intermission. The morning after Victoria's arrest, I walked into the courthouse at 8:55 a.m., clutching a thermos of motel coffee and the folder Daniels had given me. Marble floors, brass lamps, the air thick with bleach and judgment. By 9:15, they led Victoria and Kevin in through the side door, wrists shackled, eyes wild. Kevin looked like a wolf cornered in a trap. Victoria, well, she still tried to play the princess, hair brushed, chin tilted, but her mascara betrayed her. Smudged streaks down her cheeks, the look of someone who'd traded a penthouse bathroom for a holding cell toilet overnight. When the judge called their names, Kevin's lawyer launched into a plea for leniency, something about misunderstandings, about confusion in the will. I almost laughed. Confusion? Forging a signature and tossing your mother into a motel wasn't confusion. It was criminal. But then Kevin pivoted. His voice carried across the courtroom, slick as oil. Your Honor, before we proceed, there's information relevant to the estate. Mr. Whitmore, the deceased, may have engaged in financial irregularities, offshore holdings. If this court seizes our accounts, we believe it may inadvertently launder assets tied to federal crimes. My stomach dropped. Robert? Crimes? Daniels leaned toward me, whispering. He's bluffing. Stay calm. But the damage was done. The judge's eyebrows arched. Is this speculation, Mr. Miller, or do you have evidence? Kevin smirked, savoring the attention. Let's just say my client's father-in-law wasn't the saint everyone thought. We'd be happy to provide documentation in exchange for leniency. I gripped the bench until my knuckles whitened. They were dragging Robert through the mud. My Robert, who spent 40 years building a company from nothing, who paid every bill on time, who ironed his shirts on Sunday night. He wasn't perfect, but a criminal? No. Victoria seized the moment. Her voice cracked, crocodile tears dripping into her lap. Mom knew. She always knew. She lived off his money. She must have seen the accounts. The courtroom gasped. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. And me? I sat frozen, heat rising in my chest, a mix of rage and disbelief. My own daughter was painting me as an accomplice. At 11:32 a.m., the judge ordered a recess. Given these allegations, I'm instructing federal investigators to review the estate. Court resumes in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Long enough for Kevin to spin lies into webs, long enough for Victoria to play the victim, long enough for Robert's name to be dragged through every headline in the county. Outside, reporters swarmed me like flies. Mrs. Whitmore, did you know about offshore accounts? Were you complicit in your husband's schemes? I shoved past them, Daniels shielding me with his briefcase. In his office at 1 p.m., I collapsed into the leather chair. Tell me it's not true, I begged. Daniels sighed. Robert had investments overseas, perfectly legal as far as I ever saw. But Kevin will twist anything. We'll need proof records, transfers, something ironclad. My chest tightened. Proof. The word echoed like a drumbeat. That night, in the motel, I opened Robert's box of papers again. Receipts, ledgers, tax forms, stacked with his usual precision. At the bottom, a USB drive labeled simply, Legacy. I didn't sleep. At 3:17 a.m., I was still staring at it, wondering if plugging it into Daniels's computer would save me or destroy me. The next morning, Daniels examined the files, dozens of PDFs, spreadsheets, bank statements. At 10:45, he looked up, his face pale but steady. Your husband wasn't laundering money, Margaret. He was reporting fraudulent activity cooperating with federal investigators. If anything, these files clear his name, but he hesitated. We'll need to hand them over to the feds. I exhaled, relief mixing with fear. Proof of Robert's integrity, yes, but proof that he'd been in bed with the FBI, too. If Kevin got wind of it, he'd spin it as betrayal, secrecy, maybe even treason. At 2 p.m., my motel phone rang again. Victoria. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity is a sharp blade. Her voice was bitter, brittle. Mom, I know about the files. Don't play dumb. If you hand them over, Dad's name will be ruined. Yours too. Kevin says we can strike a deal. If you keep quiet, he'll drop the charges against you. We'll call it even. Even. As if tossing me into a motel, stealing my house, forging my husband's will, could be balanced on some cosmic ledger. I stayed silent. She filled the gap with venom. If you go through with this, we'll make sure every paper in town runs with the headline, Whitmore Fortune Built on Fraud. How's that for your legacy? The line crackled. I pictured her pacing a jail cell, manicured nails chipped, voice shrill. For once, she didn't sound like a princess. She sounded like a cornered rat. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. You've made one mistake, Victoria. You think shame scares me. But shame only works on people who still care what you think. And honey, I don't. I hung up before she could answer. By midnight, I had made my decision. The pawn was crossing the board, one square at a time. The queen was waiting. And Victoria? She was about to learn that the only thing darker than her lies was the truth she thought she could bury. They thought blackmail was their ace. Honey, they didn't realize I was already holding the whole deck. The morning after Victoria's little threat, I met Daniels in his office at exactly 9:02 a.m. His blinds were half drawn, his tie loosened, but his eyes sharp as razors. He slid a small device across the desk, a recording unit, discreet, no bigger than a lipstick. "Wiretap," he said. "FBI approved. They know about Robert's files. They've been watching for months. They want you to play along, let your daughter and son-in-law dig their own graves." He blinked. "FBI?" He nodded. Robert wasn't hiding money. He was helping the Bureau track it. Offshore accounts, shell companies, dirty transfers, he was their informant. That's what the legacy drive proves. Your husband was building a case, Margaret, and now they want to finish it. For a moment, the world tilted. Robert, my Robert, the man who balanced the checkbook to the penny, had been running an undercover war with criminals in tailored suits. And he never told me. At 11:15 a.m., 2 FBI agents briefed me in a beige conference room that smelled of stale coffee and old carpet. Operation Justice, they called it. The name made me smile. I'd used the same phrase with Victoria 2 nights earlier. Fate has a sense of humor. By 2 p.m., I was walking into the visitors' lounge of the county jail, lipstick recorder clipped to the inside of my cardigan. Victoria shuffled in, orange jumpsuit swallowing her figure, but her arrogance intact. Kevin followed, eyes darting, calculating. She sat across from me, folding her arms. "So, did you bring the files?" I kept my face blank. "What files?" Kevin leaned forward, voice low. "Don't play games. Robert's drive, the one labeled legacy. Hand it over, and maybe we can negotiate. Keep pushing, and you'll lose everything along with us." The recorder hummed silently, every word etched into memory. Victoria smirked. "Mom, you've always been naive. Dad wasn't some saint. He was laundering money for years. We helped him. That's what those papers show. If you turn them in, you'll go down too." He tilted my head, letting hair die deeper. "And if I don't, then we keep quiet," Kevin snapped. "We spin this as a misunderstanding. You get to keep the house. We get out clean. Everyone wins. Everyone wins. Except truth. Except Robert's name. Except me." At 3:45 p.m., the guards led them back to their cells. By 5, the FBI had the recorder in their hands, nodding grimly as they played back the confessions. Agent Morales looked at me over the folder. "This is it. Exactly what we needed. Tomorrow morning, we'll unseal the indictments. Money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy." They handed it to us gift-wrapped. For the first time in months, I breathed without the weight pressing on my chest. But fate wasn't done twisting. At 8:22 that evening, my motel phone rang again. Kevin this time, his voice slick with desperation. "Margaret, listen, we can still fix this. The Bureau doesn't care about you. They'll drag you down if it serves them. Give me the drive, I'll cut you in. 50-50. You'll never have to worry about money again." I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Honey, I already don't." And I hung up. The next morning, 9 sharp FBI agents stormed the jail during visitation hours. Phones out, cameras flashing, chaos swirling. Victoria screamed, mascara streaking, as they slapped new charges onto her. Kevin fought, shouted about entrapment, until they dragged him down the corridor. I watched from the back, silent. The pawn had crossed the board. The queen stood tall. At 11:30, Agent Morales pressed a folder into my hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, for your records. Your husband wasn't a criminal. He was our partner. 20 years of intelligence. Without him, we'd never have cracked the Miller Syndicate." The irony was almost poetic. My daughter tried to paint her father as a fraud to save herself. Instead, she revealed him as a patriot. That evening, I walked back into my house, the house she'd stolen keys jingling in my palm. The floors gleamed, the clock ticked. The silence was no longer accusing. It was waiting. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and whispered to Robert's photograph on the mantel. "We did it. They thought they could bury you, but instead, they buried themselves." Then I raised the glass, the taste sharp and victorious. Operation Justice, complete. Watch me. The night I moved back into my house, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I didn't tiptoe around like a visitor. I climbed into the master bed, my bed, and pulled the quilt tight. For the first time since Robert's funeral, I felt like the house recognized me. Not as a caretaker, not as an unwanted tenant, but as its rightful owner. By 7 a.m., I was in the kitchen brewing coffee. Sunlight hit the marble counters, the same ones Victoria once said she'd gut immediately to modernize. Funny thing, those counters suddenly looked timeless. At 9:15, Harrison called. "Margaret, the indictments are public. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. They're not wriggling out of this." I smiled into my mug. Good. Let them learn what consequences taste like. By noon, Channel 7 parked a van outside my driveway. A reporter knocked, eager for an interview. "Mrs. Whitmore, would you be willing to share your story? Elder abuse is rampant, and your case could change lives." I hesitated, not because I was afraid of the spotlight, but because I understood its weight. Then I remembered the motel walls that smelled like mildew, the folded $200 in my palm, like a waitress's tip, and I thought of women my age, shoved into corners by ungrateful children, silenced by shame. I opened the door wider. "Set up your cameras." At 3 p.m., the segment aired live. My voice, steady and deliberate, filled living rooms across the state. They told me I was just the wife. They told me to find somewhere else to die. Honey, I chose somewhere else to live instead. And I want every woman watching to know you're not just anything. You're everything. The calls began within the hour. Messages from strangers, from advocacy groups, even from lawmakers. "Your story matters," one senator said. "Let's build on it." So I did. By spring, the Whitmore Foundation for Elder Protection was born. $10 million seeded the fund. My money, my decision. We offered legal aid to seniors tricked or bullied by family. We ran workshops on inheritance rights. We lobbied for harsher penalties on financial abuse. Reporters called it poetic justice. I called it survival with purpose. 6 months later, I stood in my renovated art studio, sunlight spilling across unfinished canvases. Robert's den, once a shrine to his secrets, now pulsed with color, paint, and my breath. I dipped a brush into cobalt blue and stroked it across the canvas, steady, unhurried. At 10:27 a.m., Sarah Chen, my new financial advisor, arrived with files under her arm. "Portfolio's solid. The foundation is growing faster than expected. Netflix wants to start filming the limited series next month." I laughed, shaking my head. Imagine that, from motel mildew to Netflix marquee. But not all letters in the mail were business. 17 came from Victoria. Each one a different tone, defensive, pleading, broken. I read the first few, then I stopped. Family? No, that's DNA. When people asked if I'd ever forgive her, I told them the truth. Forgiveness is a door, and I'd built a wall where that door used to be. At 6:45 p.m., I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, the air humming with cicadas. The children across the street played catch, their laughter sharp and bright. For once, I didn't ache for what I'd lost. I savored what I'd gained: power, independence, a mission bigger than myself. And when the cameras rolled for the documentary's teaser, I looked straight at the lens and said, "The best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they swore you'd never be." I raised my glass toward the audience, one last toast. Thanks for listening, subscribe, and tell me your story, because your voice matters.